The Baker's 12 Broadcasting Corporation and Tasty Toke Cigarettes bring you an educational video presentation. The date, May 24th, 1844. The first official message sent by Samuel Morse's electrical telegraph reaches its recipient. The dots and dashes of Samuel's own Morse code were translated into this message. What hath God wrought? And with that, electronic communication was born. Fast forward now to 1876. A man named Alexander Graham Bell took the idea of communication a step forward with his electrical telephone, an invention that cut out nonsense code and let users hear the voice of the person that they were communicating with. Now, while both means of communication were huge leaps forward from horseback post riders and smoke signals, they also had big drawbacks at first. These inventions could only work where wires connected sender and receiver, and getting the infrastructure in place was not easy. Despite issues, however, the growth of distance communication was assured. At the time when others were conquering the wired world, as early as 1864, a Scottish physicist named James Clerk Maxwell theorized that invisible waves of radiant energy, or radio waves, could carry information over distance without the use of wires. His theory became known as the electromagnetic theory, and stated that electricity and light are very similar and both move at a constant speed across space. This was the first building block in radio's foundation. After Maxwell, many inventors and scientists contributed to the development of radio. For example, in 1886, Heinrich Hertz, a physicist from Germany, used Maxwell's theory to build a somewhat crude detector of radiated waves. The device generated high-voltage sparks between two metal balls. A short distance away, two smaller balls received the energy and produced a spark of their own. Proof that electromagnetic energy had traveled through the air, causing the second spark. Hertz never pursued the idea of waves for communication, but nonetheless was credited for his crucial research, even having the basic unit of electromagnetic frequency, the Hertz, named after him. In the 1890s, an Italian inventor named Guglielmo Marconi made his own wireless radio after reading of Heinrich Hertz's experiments, and was credited with sending the first coded signal wirelessly in 1899. His message, the letter S in code, was sent from Great Britain to North America. While this system was a vast improvement over others at the time, and proved wireless communication was possible, it was only set up to carry the dots and dashes of Morse's code, and not the human voice. Then, on Christmas Eve 1906, a Canadian electrical engineer named Reginald Fessenden transmitted a signal from Brant Rock, Massachusetts, to ships at sea along the East Coast. He sent out music played on a violin, readings from the Bible, and season's greetings to all that could hear. This is generally considered the first public radio broadcast with sound and not code. Also around the turn of the century, an American inventor named Lee DeForest developed a wireless system of his own. He also constructed a device to amplify weak radio signals, an improvement on one created by John Fleming, an engineer from England. Fleming's device, dubbed the Fleming valve or diode tube, looked like a household light bulb and was able to detect radio signals that carried the human voice but not able to amplify them. At this time, radio was still very new and unknown. In fact, only 2 companies even made parts for radio receivers. The government, however, saw the potential of radio and its usefulness for health and safety reasons, and that would become even more obvious after the sinking of the luxury ocean liner Titanic in 1912. The tragedy took the lives of over 1,500 passengers. However, 700 were rescued from the sea by the Carpathia, a ship that had picked up Titanic's frantic SOS signals on its own wireless radio. The scale of the tragedy and the publicity it received brought the need for wireless conformity into the open. The U.S. Congress passed the Wireless Ship Act of 1910, which required all vessels with 50 or more passengers to carry a radio with a range of at least 100 miles. 2 years later, they passed the Radio Act of 1912. This act required the licensing of all radio operations. Operators had to be U.S. citizens, and licenses were handed out by the U.S. Secretary of Commerce and Labor. Now, a word from our sponsors. Now back to Media Madness. One of the first licensed radio operations belonged to Charles D. Harold, or Doc. Doc operated a technical college in San Jose, California, and regularly broadcasted popular music of the day and speeches. This first college radio station might even be considered the first real broadcast station, had more people owned radio receivers at the time. Up to this point, radio was mainly used exclusively by inventors, enthusiasts, and the government. This all changed when a man named David Sarnoff, a manager at the American Marconi Company, realized that radio could become a commercial success. Sarnoff believed it could be a common household utility used to transmit music and information into homes wirelessly. At the same time, he suggested that large amounts of money could be made by producing radio receivers and selling them to the general public. The idea of the radio music box didn't catch on at first, and early models were poorly designed, requiring users to wear headphones to hear the signal. Radio was still largely unreliable, but Sarnoff saw the future and decided to capitalize. Broadcasting as we know it today began during the 1920s. After World War I, technology was greatly improved, and many people returned from active duty with skills in operating wireless radios. Manufacturers such as General Electric and Westinghouse started producing radio receivers that were sold exclusively by the Radio Corporation of America, a huge company that dominated the industry, run by none other than David Sarnoff. The number of homes with radio receivers grew dramatically from only 500,000 in 1923 to over 1.25 million in 1924. Cheaper radio sets were marketed, and radio truly started to grow into the mass medium that it is today. You watched it, you lived it, and you can't unwatch it. Join us next time for more Media Madness!